So what are our objectives in doing this? At some point the problem also become a possibility about building a simulator of cultural interactions, which could be used publicly by anyone, so that you only have to change some variables and introduce new worlds to the system and play with it as you want. I mean, you can put in your own game of culture and see what happens. But we are also very interested in understanding how process of cultural transmission and reproduction happen. And to analyze these results in terms of, we haven't done that so far, but the emerging behavior at the population level, cultural areas, cultural communities, boundaries, the role played by individuals' preferences, are they important at all when you are talking about the population level, or somehow they get deleted in the connections of the whole mass? And coming from literature and philosophy, the role played by cultural objects, containers of information, what we call containers of information in our model. So this being said, what is the kind of game of communication that we want our players to play? We depart from an assumption about what an individual tries to do. It's not the only thing that you can do, but one of the things that an individual tries to do with the cultural information that she receives. And we talk about two main things. You try to control it, or you try to represent it, or play with it. Okay? It doesn't mean that you have to be one of the other. Depending on the context, and we will see later, in the model, you are giving a probability, a random probability to behave one way or another. And in real terms, I think that most of us behave one way or another, depending on where the communication, the information comes from, what is our social role in that context, etc., etc. So, when we talk about control, we talk about someone who tries to expand the effect that the information has on others' cultural information. For instance, if you are a manager in a company or in the army, you receive an order and you try to pass it as you receive it and make it effective, let's say. But if you are on the other end of the communication chain, you might not like the order of the information. For instance, if you are in a colonized culture, you might not like and invent some things to try to contest what you receive in terms of information. So you try to limit the effect of information upon you. But you can be that kind of creative and innovative person that whatever you receive, you say, I don't care, I'm going to do whatever I want with that information, I'm going to change it. Okay? Doesn't matter, it's not a problem if I like it or not. My game is to change. Okay? So our agents are going to basically react that way when they deal with information. Now, we are modeling this in a platform language called, many of you might know, NetLogo 4.0 version. In this language you have basically a world and agents and that's it, and rules. Okay, so how do our agents behave? Our agents freely and randomly move in the world and they meet other agents on the same space, what in the language are called patches. They exchange information, what we call messages, either directly or by means of cultural objects, what we call repositories. You get to a library, and you leave a book, and you take another one, a book or whatever you might call it, a message. And agents will do two things with information. They learn from it when they receive it, and they will also distribute it later on. Our agents have a limited capacity, memory capacity, which we have modeled through a memory tail. So if you have capacity 6, you are going to be able to store, say, 6 messages. If a 7th message comes to you, you have to get rid of the first one in the tail. And the distribution of information, so what you're going to do when you hand out a message, will imply a change of the message at that very moment of distribution. So the change depends on the agent's preferences towards the different characteristics of the message they interact with. Okay? This is the basic layout of how the agents will behave. What we first did and first we're going to show here is what happened with these agents in a single culture. There's a single world. and they are all in the same family, let's say. So three main things will happen. There will be transmission of information. Each agent in a patch randomly will pick a different message from its memory and will give them to each of the agents on the same space, in the same patch. When you meet 1, 2, 3, or 5 other agents there. Information will also suffer a process of transformations. Agents act upon messages and change them. When, as we said before, messages get changed in every emission, you're going to hand it out. But learning, or what we call learning, also happens. So agents are also transformed by the message they receive. So you get transformed when you receive it, you change the message when you're going to give it out. At this point, the agent will have learned when he or she has to hand in the next message, and this learning will have made a transformation according to the new set of preferences in the agent. So I'm going to deal with a message. The message is going to affect my preferences towards information, and then with this new set of preferences already changed, I'm going to give out a new message. What is a message? A message is simply a unit of information that can be exchanged among agents. Technical questions? My colleague will answer. What are repositories? Repositories are a special kind of agent. As opposed to the normal mobile agents that we have around the world, these repositories cannot move, they cannot modify messages, they accept only those closer to the preferences. So let's say I have a library of 16th century books. If a book by 21st century comes and says, no, please go to another library, we don't store those here. Okay? They will have a limited capacity in terms of memory also, which is proportional to the whole amount of information in the world at any given moment. And the user can change that. Say, okay, all libraries can have 10% of the whole information that goes around. And when a visitor regularly goes to a library, as in the real world, they will hand out one of their stored messages to those agents in the same space. Okay?